There is a race happening right now between two countries, and one of them does not know it has already lost. Not lost as in falling behind, not lost as in needs to catch up, lost as in the gap between first place and second place is so wide that calling it a race at all has become embarrassing for everyone involved. One of those countries can build a warship from raw steel to open ocean in less time than the other takes to agree on a paint colour for a hull that was supposed to be finished 3 years ago. That is not an exaggeration, and it is not a metaphor. That is the current state of shipbuilding between China and the United States of America. And the numbers behind it are so lopsided that the first time most people see them, their brain assumes there has been a mistake. There has not been a mistake. This is just what happens when one country treats an industry as a strategic weapon and another one lets it die because the spreadsheets said it was not worth keeping. Here is where it starts to feel unreal. China's shipbuilding capacity, measured in gross tonnage, is now roughly 230 times that of the United States. Not double, not 10 times, 230 times. That ratio is not from a think tank trying to be provocative. It is the standing estimate from the US Navy's own assessments and from analysts at the Office of Naval Intelligence. Put it another way, in a single year, Chinese shipyards launched more naval tonnage than the entire active fleet of the Royal Navy. The whole thing. Every destroyer, every frigate, every carrier matched by one country's annual output. And that is just the military side. On the commercial side, the picture is even more extreme. China currently controls over half of all global shipbuilding orders. South Korea and Japan split most of the rest. The United States does not register. It does not hold a meaningful percentage. It does not even round up to 1. There are individual shipyards in China, single facilities that outproduce the entire American shipbuilding industry in a given year. Not the American commercial shipbuilding industry, the entire industry. Military included, 1 yard against a nation. Let that comparison sit for a moment, because it only gets worse from here. This part is hard to hear if you know the history, because this is not a story about a country that never could. It is a story about a country that used to do it better than anyone on earth, and then stopped. During the Second World War, America built ships at a pace the world had never seen before, and has never seen since, from a single country. The Kaiser shipyards in Richmond, California, could turn out a Liberty cargo ship in under 2 weeks. At peak production, the United States was launching a new vessel roughly every single day. The country did not just win the war at sea. It buried the opposition under a mountain of steel that no enemy fleet could match, no matter how advanced their individual ships were. That was 80 years ago. Today, the United States has exactly 4 major shipyards capable of building naval vessels. 4. And every single one of them is behind schedule, over budget, and struggling to maintain the ships that already exist, let alone build new ones. The most recent class of aircraft carrier, the Gerald R. Ford class, was originally budgeted at approximately $10 billion per ship. The lead ship came in at over $13 billion years behind schedule, with critical systems that still were not fully operational at delivery. The littoral combat ships, a program designed to produce affordable, fast, flexible warships, ended up costing far more than planned, performing far less than promised, and several have already been decommissioned early, some before they were even a decade old. This is not a funding problem. The US defense budget dwarfs China's official spending. Money is not the constraint. The constraint is that the industrial base, the actual physical ability to cut steel, weld hulls, fit systems, and put ships in water, has atrophied to the point where throwing more money at it does not speed things up. It just makes the delays more expensive. There are not enough skilled welders, not enough dry docks, not enough crane operators, not enough experienced naval architects in the production pipeline, not enough supplier diversity, so that one bottleneck does not stall an entire program. The workforce that once launched a ship a day has retired, and the knowledge retired with them. The US Navy currently has roughly 290 active ships. Its own long-range plan calls for a fleet of over 350. It is not building fast enough to reach that number. It is not even building fast enough to replace the ships being retired. The fleet is shrinking while the mission is growing. And across the Pacific, the opposite is happening. China did not stumble into shipbuilding dominance. This was a 30-year industrial strategy, executed with the kind of patience and coordination that most Western analysts kept insisting China was not capable of. It started with commercial shipping. In the 1990s and early 2000s, China began aggressively subsidizing its shipbuilding industry, offering below-market financing to buyers, building state-of-the-art yards with government money, and training a workforce at a scale no private sector model could replicate. The goal was not profit. The goal was capacity. Get the yards running, get the workers trained, get the steel flowing. Profit comes later, after you own the market. And it worked. Chinese yards undercut Korean and Japanese competitors on price, matched them on quality faster than anyone predicted, and scaled production to a level that made competition on volume almost pointless. By the mid-2010s, China was the world's largest shipbuilder. By the 2020s, it was not even close. Then they pivoted that capacity toward the Navy. Here is the part that Western defense planners lost sleep over. When you already have the world's largest commercial shipbuilding infrastructure, the welders, the cranes, the dry docks, the steel supply, the design pipelines converting a portion of that capacity to military production is not a generational project. It is a scheduling decision. China did not need to build a military shipbuilding industry from scratch. It already had a shipbuilding industry. It just pointed part of it in a new direction. The result is a naval expansion unlike anything the modern world has seen. The People's Liberation Army Navy, the PLAN, has grown from a coastal defense force into the largest navy on the planet by hull count. Not the most powerful by every measure. The US still holds significant advantages in carrier aviation, submarine technology, and operational experience. But in raw numbers, destroyers, frigates, corvettes, amphibious ships, Coast Guard cutters, China has surpassed the United States and is still accelerating. They are not building one class of ship at a time. They are running multiple production lines simultaneously, iterating designs between batches and delivering hulls at a tempo that makes American program timelines look like they belong to a different century. Because in some ways, they do. Now here is where this stops being a shipbuilding story and becomes something bigger. In a short conflict, a crisis that lasts weeks or a few months, the ships you have on day one are the ships you fight with. Production speed does not matter. Training, technology, and positioning matter. And by those measures, the United States Navy remains arguably the most capable fighting force on water. But wars do not always stay short, and the history of naval warfare teaches one lesson more clearly than any other. In a long fight, the side that can replace what it loses is the side that wins. That is how America won the Pacific in 1945. Not by building better ships than Japan, though it often did, by building more of them. So many more that every ship Japan sank could be replaced, and every ship Japan lost was gone forever. Today, the production math has flipped entirely. If a US destroyer is sunk or critically damaged, the replacement timeline is measured in years. The shipyard capacity to build it is already fully committed. The supply chain for its components is strained. The workforce is stretched. If a Chinese destroyer is sunk, another one is already halfway through construction. The yard that built it has 2 more berths running. The steel is already cut for the next hull. That asymmetry, not any single weapon system, not any satellite or missile or aircraft, is the strategic factor that terrifies war planners more than anything else. Because it means that in a prolonged conflict, the math does not favor the United States. Not because of courage, not because of training, because of industrial capacity, the ability to produce, and the ability to replace. And that is a gap that cannot be closed with a budget increase or a 5-year plan. It is a gap measured in shipyards that do not exist, workers who were never trained, and decades of industrial policy that prioritized efficiency over resilience. There are people in Washington who understand this. This is not a secret. Reports have been written. Hearings have been held. Phrases like shipbuilding crisis and industrial base emergency show up in official documents from the Congressional Research Service, from the Navy itself, from the Government Accountability Office. The problem is not awareness. The problem is that the honest answer to how do we fix this is an answer no one in office wants to give, because the honest answer is you probably cannot close this gap, not fully, not in the time frame that matters. Rebuilding an industrial base of this scale is not a 5-year project. It is a generational one. You need shipyards, not refurbished ones from the 1960s, new ones built for modern modular construction. You need a workforce pipeline welders, electricians, fitters, engineers, and that pipeline starts in trade schools that do not currently have the capacity or the enrollment. You need a steel and component supply chain that is not dependent on the same country you are theoretically preparing to compete with. And you need all of it to happen while the existing fleet is aging, maintenance backlogs are growing, and the strategic environment is getting more demanding, not less. Some of this work has started. There are new investments in submarine production. There are workforce development programs. There is real money being allocated. But the scale of what has been lost versus what is being rebuilt is not a gap that optimism covers. It is a structural deficit accumulated over decades, and reversing it will take decades if the political will holds that long, which historically it does not. Here is the thing about shipbuilding that makes it different from almost any other measure of national power. You can fake a GDP number. You can inflate a defense budget. You can stage a military parade with hardware that may or may not work. But you cannot fake a ship. It either floats or it does not. It either sails or it sits in dry dock. It either gets built on time or the entire world watches the delay in real time because ships are very large and very hard to hide. Shipbuilding is the most honest measure of industrial seriousness that exists. It tests everything at once: your engineering, your workforce, your supply chain, your management, your ability to coordinate thousands of moving parts across years of effort and deliver a functioning result at the end. By that measure, one country is operating at a level the world has rarely seen, and another country, the one that used to define that standard, is struggling to maintain what it has, let alone build what it needs. That is not a political opinion. It is a production schedule, and production schedules do not care about speeches, budgets, or intentions. They care about steel, labour, and time. Right now, one country has all three, and the other is trying to remember where it put them. If this one hit, subscribe. The next video covers a dependency that runs even deeper than ships, and it is one most people have never heard of. Drop a comment. Should the US try to rebuild its shipbuilding industry? Or is it already too late? I read every one.